Brachos Daf Lamed test discusses a number of halachos and hilchos brachos. It starts off by referring to what the shear of a concise is, what size olive is it with the pit or without the pit. Then it goes back to the discussion of cooked vegetables, does it lose its bracha or not? The Gemara tries to establish a few things about that. A machlokas, maybe there's another machlokas that joins with it. Then the Gemara talks about other ways in which something could lose its bracha, if it's cut up too finely, if it's included in a recipe not for its taste and not for its nutritional value, but just because of the structure that it adds to the food. Water that you cooked fruits or vegetables in, what's the bracha on that water? What's the bracha if it's a vegetable that's just meant to remove smell, or it's just meant to add flavor, but it's not something you actually eat? Then the Gemara discusses what should you be saying the bracha on. Should you say it on a slice, or you say it on the whole bread? And what is the more chashuv thing to say a bracha on? A bigger piece or a whole piece? Or maybe a more quality grain? The Gemara will discuss all these issues, so let's see what the Gemara says. The Gemara asks that we saw earlier that Rabbi Yechanan said a bracha rishona and a bracha achrona when he ate a pickled olive. So the Gemara now asks, Rabbi Yechanan asks, how is it possible that it said a bracha achrona? If you just ate one olive, then it's not the minimum size required to say a bracha achrona, which is a concise, but that's a concise where it's all food. Over here there is the pit, and besides for the pit, you do not have an olive size. The Gemara says no. The olive size that we use to measure how much one needs to eat to be able to say a bracha achrona is the average olive. This was an extra large olive, so even minus the pit, it's still at least equal to the size of an average olive altogether. Now the Gemara says, we have a Mishnah that says so, that the olive which we use to measure the size of concise is an average sized olive, which is called an aguri. The Gemara says, what's an aguri? The Gemara says it's not really called an aguri. Its actual name is avruti or samrusi. It's called aguri because it can be identified by the fact that its shemen, its oil, is agur. It is stored within it. It's not absorbed throughout the flesh of the olive. It is in a liquid form stored within the actual olive itself. The Gemara now returns to the subject of cooked fruits or vegetables and the question of whether or not they are ruined by the cooking to the extent that they lose their bracha and they are demoted to a shahakal. The Gemara now wants to say that it's a machlokes tanoim. The Gemara is going to try to prove this by quoting an incident that happened with two students of Bar Kapara. The Gemara will discuss the argument that they had, and the Gemara will try to say that their machlokes was exactly this question: what is the bracha of something that's cooked? And the Gemara is going to say no. It's not really the machlokas. The machlokas is a different thing. Now, in order to understand this story, we have to know that there are halachos as to what the correct order of brachos are when you have a number of things in front of you. So, generally, the halacha that's applied here is as follows. If there are different brachos items in front of you, then the more specific bracha goes first. So, for example, hadama would go before a shahakal. If everything's the same bracha, then whichever food you like more goes first. Okay, so let's see the incident. So the Gemara says that there were two students sitting in front of Bar Kapara and they brought them food. And amongst the food were the following three things. There was cabbages that were cooked, and there was something called dormaskin, which is not clear what it is, but it could either be prunes or it's some kind of vegetable, some spinach kind of thing, which is also cooked. And the third thing was pargiot, which is meat. It's either small young chickens or it's partridges. Okay, so you got meat and two types of cooked vegetables. Now, Bar Kapara said to them, he's going to be mechabed. One of them, he said, I'm going to be mechabed you. And he referred to one of them to say the bracha for everybody. So the guy didn't ask Bar Kapara what the bracha should be. He made it on his own. And he said a bracha shahakol on the meat. So the other Talmud made fun of him. He said, yeah, what are you doing? You said it in the wrong order. So Bar Kapara said, first of all, I'm said it the one who made fun of him because what are you doing making fun of the guy? He obviously held that the meat is more important to him, and that's because he never ate meat in his life, and that's why he made the bracha on the meat. And why you have to make fun of him just because he's not rich and he never ate meat before in his life. And on the other one he said, and I'm upset at you, why didn't you ask me what the correct bracha is? You may think I'm not smarter than you, but I'm definitely older than you, so you should for sure ask. So now the Gemara wants to analyze what is the machlokes between these two talmidim. One obviously held that the bracha on the meat comes first. The other one held that the bracha should have been on one of the cooked vegetables. So Gemara wants to say it's as follows. The one who made the bracha on the meat held that everything here is a shahakal, because cooked vegetables are a shahakal. Since everything is the same bracha, you should say the bracha on the item that you like more, the chaviv, which is the meat. That's what he held. The other one held, no, they're not the same bracha. you should say the hadama first. And the cooked vegetables are hadama. They are not demoted, and therefore you have to say the hadama on one of the vegetables before you can say the hadama on the meat. So that should then prove that this machlokes, the issue of what the correct bracha on cooked vegetable is a machlokes between these two tanoim. The Gemara says not necessarily. It could really be that everybody agrees that it's a shahakal, and the brachas on all of them are the same. The machlokes is, in a situation like this where the brachas are the same, which one gets the bracha? According to the one who said the bracha held that it's the meat, because the meat is more beloved to him, it's his favorite. And the other one said, no, the cabbage gets the bracha because cabbage fills you up, and therefore it's considered to be more chashuv. The Gemara now discusses the proper bracha on certain other types of food. First of all, we're going to talk about food which is not presented properly because it's cut too finely. Does it lose its bracha because of that? So the Gemara says that Reb Zeir says, when I was in the yeshiva of Rav Huna, I learned that if you have a turnip and you cut it up too finely, so it's not a proper presentation and it loses its bracha, it's demoted, it becomes a shahakal. Now, Rabbi Yehuda said that no, it's not true. It's a hadama even if it's cut finely. Actually, the cut finely helps it. It makes it sweeter. Rav Ashi said, when I was in the yeshiva of Rav Kahana, I learned a different halacha. If you have a dish made of cooked beets, so they added flour to the cooked beet food. So if they add a little bit of flour, so the bracha is hadama, because the flour is not so important. However, if they add a lot of flour, then the bracha is mezainis, because it becomes a major factor there. Then he said, he changed his mind, he was chayzer, he said no, even if they have a lot of flour, it's still only a hadama. Actually, the flour is not part of the bracha at all. Because here we have a new rule in halachos brachos. A food is only considered important for its bracha if it adds food value. It's something that you want to eat for its taste, or because it fills you, or some value like that. But if it's there to maintain the consistency or the structure of the dish, it doesn't count towards the bracha. In this dish of beets, the cooked beets, the flour is only added for consistency so that it should stick together and hold, and therefore it doesn't count towards the bracha, and it's hadama, not a mezainis. Now once we're on the subject, the Gemara says cooked beets are actually healthy for you. Rav Chisda says it's good for the heart, it's good for the eyes, and it's good for the intestines. And Abai says that not all cooked beets, it has to be prepared properly, it has to sit on the fire for a long time and make the sound of tuch 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 tuch, which is apparently the sound it makes when it is very overcooked and becomes very soft. Next, the Gemara discusses the water that he cooked vegetables in. Rav Papa says it's pasha to me that any water you cook vegetables in is a hadama, whether it's beets or turnips or any other vegetable. Rav Papa says, okay, well, what about a vegetable which is not made for eating, it's made for flavoring? The example he gives is called shivsa, which Rashi seems to imply is mint. So if you put mint in a pot and you cooked it up, so does that become a hadama now? Or do you say that no, the mint in the pot is not meant to give flavor to the soup or to the water, it's just meant to take away smell? It's meant to cancel out smell, so then that's not a reason for it to make the water be hadama. It's just considered like part of the functional, structural aspect of the food. It's not actually flavoring. So Gemara says, it could bring you a raya, because it says that if you have truma mint, and you cook it in a pot, once it flavors the pot, then it's not truma anymore, it doesn't have the halachas of truma anymore, and it doesn't have the halachas of tumas eichlin anymore. So you see that it's not food anymore because it gave its flavor. So the mint then is designed to give flavor to the pot, and therefore its bracha on the water would be hadam. The Gemara now asks, in what state should the food that you're saying the bracha on be in when you're saying the bracha? The issue is, if you're eating, for example, bread, so do you want the bracha to be falling on an already sliced piece of bread, so you're saying the bracha after it's sliced and the bracha goes on the slice, or do you want it to be on the entire loaf of the bread? So the Gemara says that Reb Chia said that you want it to go on the entire loaf of the bread and on the slice, therefore you should say the bracha as you're slicing, and when you're finishing the bracha, you're finishing the slicing. That way the bracha falls on the slice. So the Gemara says, well, how does that make sense? If the bracha is falling on the slice, it could just as easily fall on a slice that's already sliced before. Why do I have to finish the slicing and the bracha at the same time? The Gemara even brings Reb Chia Barashi, who says that you could say a bracha on maitzi on a shrunken, stale, dried piece of bread, which is sitting and soaking in a bowl of water, and over there it's already sliced. So Rava rejects this whole approach. He says, no, you say the bracha on the entire bread. Only afterwards do you cut off a slice. That way the bracha falls on the entire loaf. The slice comes off afterwards. So the Gemara says that's how they used to do it that's how the Rabbanon used to do it, but in Arda they used to do it like Rabbi Chia said. They used to slice it and say the bracha at the same time. Ravina says, my mother used to tell me that we do like Rabbi Chia, we slice it. The Gemara says the halacha is like Rava, you first say the bracha and then afterwards you cut off the piece. The Gemara now discusses if you have multiple pieces of the same food, which one should you say the bracha on? So we want to say the bracha on the more respectable item. We want to be mechabed, honor the bracha by saying it on a more chashva thing. So I have a couple of different factors here. First of all, what if I have a whole loaf? That's more chashav than a piece of bread. But what about the larger piece? That's in a way more chashav than a smaller piece. And then what if you have two types of bread? You have wheat bread and you have bread made from barley. So which one's more important there? So how do we organize these factors? So the Gemara says as follows. If you have two pieces of bread, which one should you say the bracha on? So Rav Huna says you should say the bracha on the bigger one, even if the other one is whole and this one's just a slice. Rabbi Yochanan says you should say the bracha on the whole one, even if it's smaller. Now both of them agree that if one of them is wheat and one of them is barley, you should say on the wheat, because wheat is more chashav than barley, and it doesn't matter about the other factors, the size and which one's whole. And the Gemara brings another machlokes which relates to this. If I'm separating truma, which fruit should I use for truma? So again, I want to use the better one, I want to use the nice one, the more chashav one. The Gemara has a machlokes. Rav Yehuda says you should use the bigger piece, and the Tanakama says you should use the whole piece. Specifically, they're speaking about an onion there. You should use the whole onion versus you should use the larger piece of an onion. So Gemara says if the kohen's not around, everybody agrees you should use a whole onion because you have to store it for a while, and a whole onion lasts longer than a started onion. So that's what you should do. But if the kohen's around, you can give him the bigger one or you could give him the whole one. That's where you have a machlekes. Now the Gemara says, what should you do? Nachman Bar Yitzchak says you should try to fulfill all the shitas at once. What should you do? You should take the big one and take the broken one. You should take the whole piece and you should take the whole challah and you should take the piece of challah if it's larger. Put them together, say the bracha on both of them together, and break them both together. That way you accomplished both things. You had the bigger one and you had the whole one at the same time. And the Gemara says that somebody said this over to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, and Rav Yitzchak asked him, what's your name? He said, my name is Shalman. So he said, oh, Shalman, Shalemata, you're complete, and your teaching is complete, and this halacha is about complete things. Everybody's complete, and you're also peace from the word Shalom. You brought peace between the different opinions here, so thank you for your teaching. Now, Rav Papa says, by the way, on Pesach, everybody agrees that this is how you have to do it. You have to hold the whole piece and the broken piece together. You want to hold the whole piece for the chashivas, you want to hold the broken piece because matzah is supposed to be lechem oini, poor man's bread, and poor men tend to eat broken pieces of matzah and not whole loaves. And then says on Shabbos, you got to use 2 whole loaves. Rav Abba says you should cut them both. Rav Ashi says Rav Kahana used to hold 2 and say the bracha, but he only opened one of them. Now, Rav Zera, what did he do? He would open one gigantic piece of challah. It didn't have to be a shalem, didn't have to be a whole one. It was just a very big piece of challah. That was enough for the entire meal. Ravina asked Rav Ashi, what do you mean? Why he would say hamaitzi on such a big piece of challah? It looks like Ravanusa. It looks like a gluttonous thing to do. He said no, he never did that the entire week. He only did it on Shabbos. So it was clear that it was only for covered Shabbos. It doesn't look like it's because he's starving, hungry. Now, the Gemara says Rav Asi would prefer to say hamaitzi if they had a chance on bread that was used for an erev chatzeris. They said, listen, this bread was used for one mitzvah of Erev Chatzeres, so great, let's use it for another mitzvah of saying Hamaitzi on Shabbos.